All right, now we're going to look at the second part of industrialization and immigration. We're going to look at what are referred to as the new immigrants and the impact they had on this particular time period. Now, it's important to distinguish between old immigrants and new immigrants. Old immigrants we're all familiar with. That would date back to the colonial period. That would technically be before 1890. Now, the defining difference between the two is the part of Europe or the location they came from. The old immigrants come from Northern and Western Europe. That's country, France, Ireland, Great Britain. Ireland's going to be weird in that it comes both old and new immigrants, but essentially it's the people that set up the 13 original colonies would be characterized as old immigrants. We're going to focus more on the new immigrants. These are the immigrants that come after 1890 during this industrialization period. All right, parts of Europe, you're going to have immigrants from Italy, Ukraine, Russia, Poland, Germany, Southern and Eastern Europe for the most part. Now, looking at this graph, I mean, obviously it extends further from 1820 to 1980, but we're looking more, this time period here, 1880 to about 1930. And you can see here in the middle, when you look at the number of immigrants that came during this period, this graph, yes, it goes up and down, but the general trend here is that it continues to go up, except for this little dip here, right? We'll get to the Great Depression and the end of the Roaring '20s down here, where you can see, immigration drops. But if you look, I mean, it's spiking like crazy. The only time it goes down is with the Chinese Exclusion Act. We'll look at that in more detail, all right? So looking at where they come from around the world. Now, the only country that's missing here is going to be England. Like we said, that was considered to be old immigrants, right? We're looking more at new immigrants, but you can see immigrants from all over the world come to the United States during this period. So coming from Asia, you have Japanese and Chinese immigrants, while the bulk of the immigrants do come from Europe. So based on the numbers here, right, you can see Italy would be one of the leaders with 4.1 million immigrants that came during this period. Austria-Hungary's up there with 4 million. Russia, 3.2 million, etc. Right? Now, the question becomes, why do these people decide to leave their countries? All right? We'll look at the difference between push factors and pull factors. Now, push factors, I have a pretty good graphic coming up that will explain it in a little bit more detail, but for push factors, the way to think about it is anything that pushes you to leave a place. So if we're in my classroom and we're talking about why you would want to leave my classroom, right? Because it's boring, because Mr. Ross smells. Those are things that push you out of my classroom, right? So things that would make immigrants want to leave their country, right? Maybe there's a civil war, poverty, people are struggling to make a living, a political revolution, religious persecution. If you think about the Puritans and Pilgrims, okay, they were pushed out of their homelands because of religious persecution. The opposite would be pull factors. Now, these are going to be reasons, why go to that particular place. So why come to the United States? Well, freedom, jobs, family, things like that. Think about, what would pull you out of my classroom into, say, Mrs. Love's classroom across the hall. She's funnier than I am. Her room smells better, right? Those are pull factors. Right? This graphic at the bottom, it's just real quick. This isn't what I was talking about, but this one still gives you a pretty good idea, pushing you out of a country, pulling you into a country. Right? This is the pretty good one that it draws a pretty good parallel in that if you're looking here at the push factors and the pull factors, you can definitely see a correlation between the two. For instance, something that pushes you out of a country, the opposite will potentially pull you into another country. So if a lack of jobs or unemployment pushes you out of your homeland, you go to a country that has potential for employment. If you leave a country because of poverty, you're going to another country because it has the possibility for greater wealth. Look at here, crop failure. Okay, for instance, the potato famine, they leave, that pushes them out of Ireland. The idea of good, fertile farmland pulls you into another country. Okay, here's a pretty good way of looking at it. I mean, it's a little elementary, but the principle holds true. The finger pushing you out of one, a magnet is a good idea. Right? What is attracting you to that new place? Right. Now, upon arrival to the United States, we're all familiar with Ellis Island, right? You have the Statue of Liberty down here. That was the first the site that they had arrived in the New World. But not all immigrants came to the United States through Ellis Island. All right. So we do have the processing facilities. European immigrants come to the United States through Ellis Island. And the easy way to remember this is the E's. You have E for European, E for Ellis Island. Now, why do they need to be processed? Right, the United States government was very protective of any diseases that they may be bringing. You didn't want criminals leaving their country, coming to the United States. So just so the country or the government had a pretty good idea of who was coming into the country. Asian immigrants, all right, they're going to come in through Angel Island. So once again, easy way to remember it is the A's. All right, you link the A's, you link the E's. Mexican immigrants, they're going to enter through Texas. All right, it's just a matter of convenience. All right, what side of the country are you coming into? Okay, when they come to the United States, right, where do they settle? You know, they now are in this brand new land, right? There are going to be certain things that determine where they end up going. Okay, the number one place immigrants go are the cities. That's where the jobs are. You know, they're stepping off the boats. They're stepping through Ellis Island. They have no money. They have no food. They have no homes. They go to the cities. That's where the jobs are located. All right, we talked about the industrialization in the United States, all those new factories. Right, they want the immigrants to come. Right, once they settle in the cities, right, I'm sure we're all familiar with Little Italy and Chinatown. Okay, it's important to know we're all familiar with it with New York City, but in a lot of the major cities during this time, they all had their own Little Italy or their own Chinatown. Think about it. If you were an immigrant and you came to the United States, you didn't speak the language, you didn't know what to do, you looked for somebody that spoke your language or had the same ethnicity that you did. They would be able to help you find your way. They might be able to, you know, you could stay with them for a couple days until you find something. They might be able to get you, help you find a job, things like that. Okay. Now, the reactions to immigration. We all consider the United States a melting pot. We've heard that before. Okay, a place where, you know, the United States, the American ideal is based upon all these different ethnic groups that come. You know, we have English immigrants, we have Irish, we have Italian, we have German, we have Polish, we have French, Spanish, right? Looking at how they blended into the American society, that blending in process is referred to as assimilation. Now, some are going to have an easier time than others. Okay, obviously the language barrier, that was a big one. The physical features is definitely going to be an obstacle that they face as well, right? While they were, in some instances, forced to adopt the American ideal, some immigrants are going to, you know, carry on their own culture into the United States, or, you know, kind of bring their country into, or their culture, excuse me, into the American culture. For instance, food, language. We know the Italians gave us pizza and pasta. You have Christmas coming from the Northern Europeans. Okay, here's the negative side of it. Many people viewed immigrants as a threat, meaning that they would take jobs away from American workers. All right, Americans, just to throw out a number, they might be willing to work for $5 an hour, but if you get an immigrant who just comes off the boat, they'll be happy to work for $2 an hour. So if you were a factory owner, right, who would you hire? You're going to hire the immigrant worker because you will have to pay them less money, right? So a lot of Americans didn't like the foreigners coming in because they were afraid of them taking the job. It got to the point where the government actually gets involved and passes laws to restrict or limit the amount of immigrants that come in. And the example being here, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, no Chinese immigrants for 10 years. So if we remember the graph we had before, okay, there was a big drop-off in immigration, and a lot of that was because of the Chinese immigrants. Okay, and then I have two cartoons that I want us to take a peek at. The first one here, we know this guy is Uncle Sam. You always see the top hat and the beard. Okay, these are all European immigrants coming through this funnel into the United States. And what's he doing? He's putting a gate here trying to limit the amount of immigrants that come into the United States. So we start off opening our doors for everybody, and then we quickly realize that, you know, we can't necessarily accommodate all of these immigrants that want to come to the United States. So the government's getting involved and restricting the amount that come. The other one here would kind of be the opposite. You know, here's Uncle Sam again. He's welcoming all of these immigrants to the United States or onto the boat, right? And here would be an example of all the pull factors: no oppressive taxes, no expensive kings, no military service, pulling people into the United States.